Hello, everyone. We are back with another Simply Trade podcast news roundup edition. My name's Annik. I'm your host. We have Trump's 25% tariffs on imported automobiles. That he said, I believe, on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this action is taken under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, aims to protect America's automobile industry. Whether it's protecting or not, you can make your own opinion on that. The tariff applies to imported passenger vehicles, so sedans, SUVs, crossover, minivans, cargo vans, and light trucks. I'm sure we'll get more information on that coming before April 2nd. Okay, then we have the temporary exemptions for Canada and Mexico. We have talked about that on the podcast before, USMCA, which will stop April 2nd or April 3rd, I believe, unless we get different notifications on that. Notifications on your phone. You'll get a notification. And then we have the OECD warning on trade fragmentation, which they have issued us a warning about the potential slowdown in global trade growth due to increasing fragmentation. I have touched on this last time. So the global GDP growth is expected to decline from 3.2 in 2024 to 3.0 in 2026. I think that's because there's a lot going on in the trade world, a lot of trade wars, whatever you want to call it. So those are kind of the newest updates we have. Okay, now I'm getting to the good stuff. And we're kind of talking, obviously, we're more talking on the news. And so with no further ado, we have Ariana Cox from PAX on the podcast. And I'm so excited. Hi, Ariana. How are you doing?
Oh, hi, Annik. It's so great to be on the Simply Trade podcast with you guys. I just love the podcast, listen to it every week. We really appreciate what all you guys put out.
Yeah, a little backstory. We met at ICPA, and she definitely told me that she's been listening to the podcast, which I love to hear. Sometimes I question it. I'm like, do you really? Is that a joke? Like, are you lying? But I'm glad that you do. And I hope that it's helpful. And, we're always trying to do better and getting people that have little, different areas of expertise. And one is duty drawback, which I have not talked about. And again, this is a news roundup. So we're trying to connect it to the news, which actually there is a big connection, which we will be addressing today. So, one thing that I came forward with to Ariana was the Customs Facilitation Act of 2025, which has been proposed. And this bill aims to streamline custom processes and enhance data transparency. It includes provisions to update CBP programs, accelerate duty refunds, there we go, for certain re-exported items, and mandate regulations for advanced submission of export manifest data. So I do want to address, Ariana, you have been dealing with duty drawback for a while now, right? You're an expert at it, I would say. That's why you're at PAX. That's where the experts work. And so can you share a little bit more about maybe even, let's backtrack a little. Where is duty drawback right now? Are there any problems with it? Do we see anything where people maybe need to streamline custom processes and enhance data transparency? What do you currently see?
Yeah, so what we really love about this Customs Facilitation Act is especially in the duty drawback field, is where there are some redundant tasks that we have to do. There's a piece of that act where they are going to help streamline the privileges. So right now it's quite a process that you go through. There's a privilege application, and we're talking about their accelerated payment that allows you to get your drawback refund faster. And then there's a waiver of prior notice. So right now, what you would have to do if you don't have waiver of prior notice is you have to alert customs, let them know in advance that you're going to export a product that you would like to claim drawback on. And what that does is it gives customs the ability to either come inspect your goods or they can waive that. But what you want in place is a privilege called waiver of prior notice. So you don't have to kind of jump through those hoops every time you want to do an export for drawback. So what that's doing, what the act is proposing to do is to kind of streamline that. They're going to do, there's not going to be a formal application process. There will be some information that you have to send, some examples of your documents. But once you're approved, it says in the act that it would apply to all drawback claims as long as you have a drawback bond in place. So what's nice is you're not going to have to go back each time you want to, you may uncover another provision that you want to claim under. Maybe you were doing direct identification. Now you want to do substitution. You're not going to have to go back and get another application approved. It's going to apply to all those. So that was one thing that was really great in that, just kind of streamlining privileges. Another thing that act is doing in the drawback space is it's implementing a de minimis of $20. So if you file a drawback claim and at the end of it, customs finds maybe a little discrepancy there, and it's your liquidated claim is less than the change in what you filed, and what's liquidated is less than $20. It's just a de minimis. You're not going to get a bill. So today, what happens is you can get a bill for $10 in your drawback claim, or you're going to have to mail a check for these small amounts. So it puts in place this de minimis, so we don't have this kind of back and forth little small pieces of money between trade and customs.
I want to jump back a little bit real quick, because duty drawback for me, when I got into it, and I know there's a lot of people listening that don't even understand duty drawback really, because it is somewhat of a complex topic, right? Some people don't qualify for duty drawback. And some people do. So can you jump back to what duty drawback, like let's say, I'm starting my business and I don't know anything about it. What would you tell someone like that?
Yeah, duty drawback it's a refund of duties, taxes, and fees. And I'll go over exactly what those are in just a second. But it's basically a refund that you can get on the duties and some other fees that you pay on your import if subsequently you have an export or a destruction of that product. And there's different ways you match that stuff up. There's some where you're looking at your SKU level detail, your part numbers. So if you're importing a specific part and you can trace that through to an export or a destruction, you can get a refund on those duties that you paid on your import. Same with there's another one called substitution. So you don't have to track the exact import through. What you're looking at is the first 8 digits of the HTS US. So if your import and your export match the same 8 digits, you have potential for a drawback claim there. So it's just a refund if you import goods and then you subsequently export or destroy. But it's in addition to just duties that you can draw back on. No, it's regular duties, it's 301 duties. There's also refunds of harbor maintenance tax, merchandise processing fee, excise tax, oil spill tax, Superfund tax that's paid on petroleum products. There's just, whenever you think about refunds, just remember that it's more than just your duties. Sometimes, depending on if it's high value items and they are coming in on vessel and you're paying these huge harbor maintenance taxes, you know that you might have a potential for drawback there. In the petroleum space, if you're importing cargoes that are usually pretty expensive and you're paying that harbor maintenance tax in addition to Superfund tax, there's a lot of money there that you could get back.
So it says that the Customs Facilitation Act of 2025 says elimination of prior approval for substitution drawback.
I did, but that one is specific. So that looks like in that act, what they're saying is specific to manufacturing, substitution manufacturing. So it's saying that you're not going to have to get a prior approval or a ruling in place before you can file those drawback claims, which is a whole nother process. And these applications take 4 to 6 months apiece to do. So if you're doing a privilege application and a ruling application, you could be, 6 to 10 months before you can actually start recognizing that that drawback money. So eliminating those, that red tape of those applications is really going to help people file drawback faster and get their money back into their own bank accounts quicker.
Everything involves trade, I always say. And now trade is affected. So with the 25% tariffs that are put on things and, the trade wars, has it been affecting duty drawback in a sense? Or is this, where people get more money out of it because they pay more duties? Or, does the duty drawback process change? Is there any effects that go into duty drawback?
Yeah. So a lot of the new tariffs that have been put into place, the 25%, the 232s, those unfortunately don't qualify for drawback. But what does qualify still are your regular duties, those 301 duties. So what used to may not be very important now, used to be, it's just a little bit of duty. If you're having to pay all these additional duties on top of what you were regularly paying, it's now worth it a little bit more to go back and say, okay, I may not be able to get my refund on all this additional, but I'll at least want my refund on what I'm entitled to or what I'm eligible for. So it's going to be your regular duties. But in that, there may be some additional opportunities for some folks. So there's this de minimis imports that right now, there's a hold on that. But if that goes into effect, you're going to see these small amounts of duties start being paid. And what could open up in drawback is that I haven't seen that there's not the ability to claim this de minimis because that's regular duties. So if you're one of these companies that's going to impact, you should look into drawback and see if when and if this goes into effect, let's look at your drawback program. I mean, you might have some exports, you might have some destructions that can help you get some of that money back. The other thing that we've seen is some of the retaliatory tariffs that may go into effect for Canada, Mexico. There could be some additional opportunity there for manufacturing claimants. How it used to work in the past is that if you import a product, say from China, you're paying your regular duties and your 301. It's quite a bit of duty that you've paid on that import. And then you use that import to produce another product that then's exported into Canada or Mexico. Well, the duty rate into Canada and Mexico has been 0. So for drawback, you have to compare those two duties, the duties paid on the import into the United States versus the duties paid on your finished product into Canada or Mexico, which was 0. So when you do that lesser of, there was no drawback opportunity there because it was always 0. But if there starts to be some tariffs where you're having to pay to go into Canada or Mexico, it could open up some of that direct identification manufacturing that really was valueless before. Those are some areas we see.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, within companies, they're already struggling to, what is our supply chain process looking like? What can we do to save money? And how can we keep our company afloat? Now we add, duty drawback is something maybe people don't think of immediately. I don't know, but in my mind, that's what it is because they're just worried about the tariffs. Who do you call for this kind of a thing? Because, if they weren't getting any duty drawback and now they are, how do they find a person, to do that? And how do they even understand that they can maybe claim duty drawback now? So how would you say that goes on? And I know you work with PAX, and is that something you guys do or?
Absolutely. And I think there's a PAX, definitely, as long as a lot of brokers you'll find, they will do an initial analysis for you. So what we do is we go in, it's no cost up front. So, and that's usually across the industry. I mean, I'm not going to speak for every broker out there, but a lot of drawback providers will come in and they will help you do an assessment of your drawback program. What potential products could you claim? And they'll even give you an estimate of how much drawback you could potentially get back. So if you're being affected by duties, these higher duties or just duties in general, it's worth a call. It's not going to take anything besides a little bit of coordination. I mean, there is some data that a broker would need to look at to kind of review your program and give you a good estimate. But I think it's worth it. I think just call up a broker that specializes in duty drawback and at least get the ball rolling. Start asking the questions because, just say, hey, look at my program. You may not know all of the opportunities, but a well-seasoned drawback analyst is going to be able to review your data and let you know what's available for you.
Do you sometimes see like a high duty drawback? I really don't know what a duty drawback would look like, but is it going to be a significant number from what they're paying, or is it just a tiny amount? Does it make...
It really depends on the company. So one of the things you kind of we start looking at on a high level is, do you have a manufacturing program, or are you in the unused space, or are you retail where you might have some returns? So we kind of look at that. And then there's different rules that follow each of those. And we also need to know how much are you exporting? What's the value of those exports? All of that plays into the calculation and the estimation of your potential drawback refund. But what some people don't think about so much is their supply chain. Just because maybe you're a manufacturer, but you're not importing the product. If you can trace or even through substitution, get that product from the importer into your manufacturing facility, if we can show that, there's a potential for drawback there. Same thing, if you're an exporter and there's a different company that's the importer, say you're importing and you're selling it to someone who exports, that importer can partner with the exporter. And if you guys can work together, you can file a drawback claim. You can match that import to the export. Now, you can't just match anything. There has to be what's called a commercial relationship. So like if Annik, I'm selling to you, I can only give you imports up to the volume that I sold to you. We can only partner and drawback up to the quantity that was actually sold. And then we'd have to look at the tariffs and stuff like that. But definitely supply chain is an untapped area. If you can get it into your importers and exporters, make those links, there's potential there that people don't necessarily think about.
So strategies have to change, and people kind of have to do this now, right? They have to make the analysis now so they don't have to wait on the money later and file for duty drawback immediately once the tariffs hit and they import or export their products, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you would want to see like what are the tariffs being paid? I mean, like I said, the newer duties, these 25% and stuff, they're just not eligible for drawback. So, but we definitely want to look at what you do have in your system. But one of the biggest hurdles, or I guess pain points that people have for drawback, is the amount of documentation, the how much work is it going to cost me and my team to go in and pull all this stuff that we need for duty drawback? But you have to have the processes in place now. It's better to go ahead and contact someone who can help you understand what documentation you have to have for duty drawback, get those processes in place, make sure those numbers that are needed are being documented across your all of your documentation, and go ahead and get those processes in place. Because if you don't have them already in place now, it's really, you're going to lose the drawback on this stuff that's happening today. Because you can go back 5 years on your imports. So if you're not doing it today, you're not already got these processes in place, you're just going to potentially not be able to claim that import. And we always say sometimes, let's get you where you need to be. Let's get all the documentation shored up, everything in order, and then you can claim going forward. But you definitely don't want to keep leaving things on the table.
You guys use AI, so that's a little bit different than a regular duty drawback program, right? So guys, there's different programs out there, and you obviously have to find the right fit for you, correct? I mean, if you're talking about implementing a duty drawback program, you need to find someone who fits within your company, because there's so many out there.
There's some that are very great in specific industries. Some that are just, or I'll say they're great, in lots of industries, but they maybe have a focus in your particular industry. Or you may find that what we've heard a lot of times is that, hey, I've called up a customs broker and they just wouldn't even look at my program because it wasn't worth enough. The barrier to entry was set pretty high because has historically been a lot of manual process that goes into that. Getting all your documents, pulling all the data, getting it all done. But what's happening is with the implementation of AI agents, we're able to do that so much more efficiently that the barrier to entry into Drawback has dropped because we can take clients who before you couldn't get a broker to look at you. Now Drawback is being opened up to those industries and those companies because of the use of AI and the efficiency that it brings.
Is there a certain discrepancy there in duty drawback?
There definitely can be. So the more times you have a human interaction of retyping any sort of data, you're going to have room for error. So you really want some tools that are going to be able to extract data directly from documents, directly from ACE, so that you're not having someone rekey. I mean, back in the old days, I've been doing this for about 17 years. Back in the old days, we were all on paper. A lot of the stuff had to be rekeyed. So you're sitting there typing in all of the data that's on a 7501 entry summary. But now it's so much more automated. You can pull all that data in. So, if I'm keying in a quantity or a value, and then I process and it's wrong, and I process a duty drawback claim based on that, now I have asked customs for more money than I'm entitled to. So that's an issue. You're going to have to, amend that claim.
Hello, that's our money.
Right. So it could just cause some issues in your in your calculations, and there's other errors. There's things like people who may not be experts in Drawback, but you can learn so much faster now. You can kind of focus in on maybe the one or two provisions that apply to your company. You don't have to know Drawback about every provision out there, but the ones that apply to your company, you can understand those concepts so much faster. But there's things like, I've seen things where we have companies that maybe don't understand the difference in the accounting methods that you can use for direct identification. Some of them you have to use domestic withdrawals, and some you don't. So the AI agents can detect, okay, you've used this accounting method. Did you apply those domestics or not? It can pick up on that anomaly and alert you, hey, it doesn't look like you're in compliance with this particular provision and rule.
I hope that people got something out of it today and are looking at your duty drawback program. I would say that this is a great way to get ahead, especially we know that Liberation Day is coming next week. I think it's on Thursday. Liberation Day is what they call it. I put in quotation marks. And that's why I'm so glad you came on, Ariana. I'm so happy to talk to you about this topic because I know you're an expert at it. Please let me know how you like this episode. And again, we are releasing the news roundups every Monday. And so will we be back next week? Thank you so much, Ariana, for coming on and talking on this topic. And we'll see what's to come because we have no idea. So, and we'll see if the Customs Facilitation Act is coming into effect. We don't know that yet either. We don't know a lot of things. So thank you for listening, and you have a great day or week. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.